Hello, BookTube, and welcome to the Steve Tiberius Donahue Book Club for 2025. Our choice for March is this book, Sarah Bradford's 1996 biography of England's Queen Elizabeth II, which is, on the surface, a bit of an odd choice for a couple of reasons. The main one being that in 1996, Queen Elizabeth II still had many decades to reign as queen. She was born in 1926. She came to the throne in 1952 and ruled for 71 years, almost 71 years, 70 years and 200 something days. The longest reign of any regnant queen in English history. One of the longest reigns of any monarch in monarch history. So she had a lot to go through after the end of this book. So it might at first seem like an odd choice for a book club of any kind. I picked it for a couple of reasons. One, I think it's really entertaining, and that certainly can't be said about all biographies of Queen Elizabeth II. Two of the biggest and most well-known ones that came out at the very end of her life are not very enjoyable. And two is I want to impose my own weird idiosyncrasies on my book club, as all indomitable rulers of book clubs do, by pointing out that works of biography and history don't date. If they're well-done books on their own, then it doesn't matter if they're not the latest thing. They're not up to date and the latest thing. I think that's true of this book. I think it's a delightful reading experience, regardless of whether or not it gets Queen Elizabeth all the way to a cenotaph. And it doesn't. She has years and years left to reign when this book is over, including major things, major events in her life that are not part here. This is not a Wikipedia entry, right? This is a work of literature. You hope that it's a work of literature. Sarah Bradford is the author of a number of really good works of biography and also a countess. And this book club, all the BookTube book clubs, all the book clubs here for March, all suffer from one same little odd peculiarity, which is that March starts on a weekend. March starts on a Saturday. And typically book clubs, as I tend to do them, we tend to catch up with each other on the weekends. And I made no announcement. I made no plans about this at all. So this is just going to be a very brief announcement that we have commenced this book. We're not going to start talking about it until next weekend. I'm just going to read you a bit of the opening, just to give you a hint of what's going on here. One of the elements that I like about reading, especially the life of Queen Elizabeth II, is that it's also a reflection, a very good reflection, an odd but good reflection of the history of the 20th century in the West. But this is how the book begins. I've fallen into the habit of reading openings of books on this channel anyway. Let's see the first long paragraph of this. On a bitterly cold early February afternoon in 1952, a British Overseas Airways Corporation's Argonaut aircraft taxied to a halt at London's Heathrow Airport. A reception line of members of the royal family and the British government, among them the unmistakable figure of Winston Churchill, stood waiting on the tarmac. All were dressed in black mourning for the late king. Despite the cold wind, the men were hatless in honor of their new queen. Aboard the aircraft, a slim young woman of 25, her skin lightly tanned by the African sun, looked out of the window. Behind the line of men in dark overcoats, ranged up to greet her, loomed the black bulk of the ancient royal Rolls-Royces. "Oh," she said, a momentary gleam of grim humor lighting her seriousness, "I see they've brought the hearses." She had waited to the last moment before donning a black coat and hat, as if to put off as long as she could the moment of formal acknowledgement that her father was dead and that what private life she had had was forever over. As she stepped out to greet the members of her administration, she became an icon with a dual role, executive woman and symbol of her country first, wife and mother second. She had accepted her destiny. That's how this book begins, with that wonderful glint of humor. How does Sarah Bradford know that she made that quip about the hearses? Is she getting that from Royalty Magazine or from Palace Scuttlebutt? Is it true? Or did she hear it from somebody who was there? Or maybe the person who said it? We don't know, but it's not a marble and steel stately opening. It's a human opening, and it's an amazingly dramatized moment. whether any of those details about waiting as long as possible to put on black or whatnot, whether any of those details are actually true, that moment, Elizabeth and her husband had been vacationing in Africa. They had been in Africa in the bright sunlight, having tense troubles, arguments of their own, but still, it had been another world. It hadn't been rainy, cloudy old England with Winston Churchill looming on the tarmac. It hadn't been that. And now it is. And now not only is it, but it will now be forever. You have to believe, even if the specifics aren't literally true, you have to believe that Queen Elizabeth, as she is now, that Elizabeth Windsor felt that moment on that plane. Once I step off here, my life as I knew it is over. You have to feel that that's true. It is, in other words, a wonderfully realized human moment at the beginning of this big biography. So I like it. I like the way it begins. I hope you enjoy this, and maybe accept, those of you who didn't accept it before, my belief, which I believe I can defend and that is true, that works of biography and history ought to stand on their own. They ought not to be viewed as teletype updates. This is not a bad biography because the subject is not finished at the end of it. I could easily have done the same thing with Jonathan Dibley's biography of Prince Charles. Nice big thing that came out, I think, a little bit before this. Also a fantastic biography, even though obviously the major elements of Prince Charles's life had yet to happen. But anyway, let's take a look at what we have to do for the actual book club, which will begin next weekend. We'll talk about next weekend. So what have we got here? We have 19 chapters if we include the epilogue, so close enough to 20. So we want to do about 5 chapters a week. 4 or 5 chapters a week will be fine. They will never be strict. There are no cliffhangers here, so it won't matter if you do 4 or 5, but thereabouts. So chapter 1 here is called Destiny. So let's go to her marriage to Philip. So the chapter of princely marriage. Let's go to there for next weekend. Nice big chunk of that necessarily involves a lot of looking backwards as well as looking forwards. Because Sarah Bradford is going to want to fill you in on who the Windsors are, what this world is, that Elizabeth is stepping off that plane and entering. So we'll talk about all that next weekend. I just wanted to give you a brief throat clearing. This is our book club has started. This is what we're reading, and we will be doing it properly next weekend. The weekend caught me and everybody else by surprise. But I'll be back. Thank you.